My spouse regrets following progressive relationship advice to open our marriage. Now I'm desperately seeking guidance on whether it's possible to rebuild trust, salvage love, and save what's left of our once happy union. Spouse realizes mistake after following progressive relationship guidance to open their union. I'm seeking counsel on how to salvage the remaining pieces of my matrimony. Let me begin by explaining I've been wed to my partner for 5 years and together for 7 for privacy purposes. I'll call us James and Skylar. We connected during our sophomore year at community college. I earned a 2-year certification in administrative management while James pursued a 4-year business administration degree. Through distance learning at the local college, jumping ahead to present day, I'm 26, James is 27, and we were preparing to begin building our family this year. Our aspiration was 4 children, preferably 2 sons and 2 daughters. We maintained a joyful union, and both our extended families cherished us. Now this is where I made my terrible error. I cultivated what others might describe as an office spouse, but in my situation, it involved a courier from one of the major shipping companies who serviced our workplace. Let's call this individual Jaden for anonymity. At 25 and unattached, Jaden had been making runs to my location for almost 2 years. From our initial encounter, a distinct connection existed, not necessarily romantic, but an unmistakable energy. I felt pulled toward him, and we would chat for no less than 10 minutes during each visit. I anticipated his arrivals and consistently positioned myself at the front when his delivery window approached. One afternoon, our discussion extended beyond usual boundaries. Jaden mentioned having a private inquiry for me. He emphasized it was quite intimate and hoped not to offend me or compromise our professional rapport. I assured him, certainly not. You can ask me whatever. Jaden then expressed, I sense a powerful magnetism toward you, and wondered whether you experience it as well. I found his directness startling and rather uncomfortable. After pausing to collect myself, I shared honestly, I confessed I absolutely sense it too. Jaden revealed that he would have pursued me romantically if I weren't married. I appreciated his honesty, and our exchange concluded there. He departed, and that concluded it. For the following week, we maintained only brief, uncomfortable pleasantries. When he arrived with shipments, I felt deeply troubled and guilty that I might have overstepped boundaries with him. I simply couldn't dismiss this sensation. At home, James and I were relishing matrimonial bliss. Let me emphasize, clearly, I've consistently been completely content with James as my partner, companion, and spouse, and believed then he would have expressed likewise about me. He was ideal for me. That said, I foolishly began fantasizing about how I could greedily maintain both my devoted husband and some form of connection with Jaden beyond our workplace exchanges. Later, I discovered this is occasionally termed wanting everything. I began investigating and discovered articles discussing polyamory and open relationships. I considered these concepts absurd and repulsive, so I didn't dwell on them initially. I also understood my husband would reject such arrangements, and even if he accepted, it might damage our marriage and alienate both families, something I wanted to avoid. Weeks passed, and my marital life continued wonderfully as usual, but I kept contemplating establishing something with Jaden. I resumed studying the topic and encountered an online article titled "No Harm in Asking." It was a blog entry by a woman claiming to maintain a thriving open marriage. She described loving her husband while desiring involvement with someone she encountered during charitable activities. The blogger explained she simply didn't know how to broach this topic with her spouse without wrecking their relationship. She suppressed these emotions for over 2 years. Then, during a lengthy car trip, she decided to ask him. Surprisingly, he showed genuine curiosity. Long story abbreviated, they opened their union and both now maintain external partners. They visit 3 to 4 times monthly. The blogger stated they've continued this arrangement for 4 years, and their marriage has grown stronger, while both feel more fulfilled than ever. Her account captured my interest because it reflected exactly what I desired but feared discussing with my husband. Then one Sunday morning, while we relaxed at home browsing our devices and conversing casually, I chose to introduce the topic and questioned him directly. I just discovered this online article about open relationships. What's your perspective on them? He then inquired whether I meant couples being intimate with others. I confirmed and asked again for his thoughts. He said he found it revolting and people should simply divorce if they wanted to be promiscuous. I mentioned it's actually gaining popularity here in America and throughout Western nations. James' expression showed his disgust with the subject, so I quickly shifted topics based on his response. I planned never mentioning it again, as the last thing I wanted was threatening our marriage, since it was wonderful. A few weeks later, James and I are snuggling in bed, euphoric after incredible intimate time. I'm resting on his chest, unable to see his expression, and suddenly he asks, who are you considering when you mentioned open relationships last week? I was shocked and felt nauseated. I slowly lifted my head to face him and said, what do you mean? James then revealed he had research suggesting that when women bring up open relationships to partners, they've either already been unfaithful or have someone specific in mind. His disclosure startled me. Actually, it shattered me completely. James recognized the impact his words created and said, I know you intimately. I can tell you're concealing something, so be truthful. I remained silent, looked away, then told him I had never betrayed him and never would. I could have stopped there, but didn't. I then confessed that if we ever explored an open Marriage. There was a colleague I might consider James asked to describe this work colleague, so I started explaining about Jaden and our encounters, until then including what Jaden had shared about his attraction but didn't reveal I had expressed similar feelings back. James' next statement terrified me. He said, "Technically you've already betrayed me." I became annoyed and responded defensively insisting I hadn't, but he argued yes, the connection you maintain with this Jaden person is what's called an emotional affair. I had never encountered this term before, so James clarified it for me. I grew increasingly frustrated, and James suggested we pause this discussion as he needed sleep due to an early morning the next day. He dozed quickly, but I couldn't. Instead, I grabbed my device and researched emotional affairs, reading countless articles and posts about them. James was correct. What I shared with Jaden was dangerously close to an emotional affair. Actually, let me clarify that it was indeed a complete emotional affair. I felt awful, as if I had deceived my husband. Unable to sleep, I left bed, went downstairs, and brewed tea. I eventually slept on the sofa around 4 in the morning. At approximately 6:45, James woke me with a kiss, saying he was departing for work and I needed to begin my day. As it was nearly 7, as usual, I returned his kiss and expressed my love, but this time I emphasized the sentiment even more. My thoughts clouded with guilt regarding my feelings for Jaden. Several days elapsed, and again we were resting in bed after being intimate when James suddenly said he'd be open to trying an open marriage if I genuinely wanted this. This caught me off guard, and I asked, "Why are you raising this now?" He explained he'd been contemplating our conversations and figured we should attempt it while young if it was something we craved. I showed interest, but promised never to endanger our marriage or love, as he remained the most significant person in my life. James replied by saying if our love bond is solid, it will survive infidelity. I countered that a mutual open relationship wouldn't constitute infidelity, because we would both consent to it. Rather than commenting on that, he simply said consider our marriage open beginning immediately. I was surprised again and urged him to proceed slowly, saying we needed to establish boundaries. He specified the only boundaries he wanted were first we needed to announce who we planned intimacy with and when beforehand, second we had to share the encounter with each other afterward without graphic details, and third protection must be utilized for all intimate activities, no exceptions. I accepted his conditions and suggested adding 2 more points. Fourth, we would maintain our open marriage private, and fifth, we would promise each other these extramarital connections wouldn't ruin our marriage, and we'd stay together. James stated he couldn't accept either condition. When I asked why, he simply said he wouldn't, and refused to discuss it further. I felt very uncomfortable about this, as this was completely unlike James, but I cuddled with him, and we slept. My conversations with James left me uneasy about the entire open relationship concept, like he had some hidden agenda. So for the next month I didn't pursue the open relationship, and we lived normally. During this period I maintained distance from Jaden at work, only having brief basic conversations about weather and workload, superficial topics. Then one day Jaden told me he genuinely missed our talks and asked what was wrong. I told him I was swamped at the office and home and simply didn't have time to chat lately. Mentally I was considering whether I should tell him about my open marriage. I decided I would. How I wish I could reverse time and undo this choice. It didn't seem proper to have such conversation at the office, so instead I invited him for drinks after work that day, which he accepted. We met at a local establishment with an outdoor area perfect for the mild early spring climate. I told him about my recently open marriage and directly asked if he'd be interested in a relationship with me. He didn't hesitate and said yes. He said he'd been waiting for me to come around and hadn't pressed out of respect, but said he'd been dreaming about me for months. Most of our conversation during that meeting was flirtatious. It was Tuesday, and we agreed to meet the next day for our first romantic encounter at his place right after work. However, I stressed I'd need to depart by 6:30 to return home to my husband, who remained my absolute priority. That evening I returned home and prepared a beautiful dinner for James. After eating, I informed him about my conversation and meeting with Jaden earlier, and that we had arranged a date for tomorrow after work at his apartment, provided James remained comfortable proceeding with our open marriage. I could tell James was taken aback as he responded, "Oh yes, all right, so you're meeting him tomorrow." I confirmed, but assured him we could still cancel, as my main priority was him and us. He insisted, "No, let's do this." We embraced, but I sensed stiffness and distance in his hold, unlike our typical ones. I attributed this to anxiety. We didn't converse much that evening, as he was busy working in his study and I had my own administrative tasks. When we went to bed I spooned with him and tried initiating intimacy, but he mentioned being too tired and needed rest. The next morning when I awoke, James had already departed, leaving a message explaining he had an early conference he'd forgotten to mention. He added he'd see me that evening. This was unusual for him, but I dismissed it and continued my routine of dressing and heading to work. I selected a particularly attractive outfit that day, knowing Jaden and I were meeting right after work. Throughout the day, I messaged James but received no replies. I was again considering canceling the date with Jaden. Telling you my story, I really wish I had. When at 4:17 I received a text from James. He wrote that he loved me and would see me that evening. This brought relief, and I interpreted it as his approval to proceed. I'll cut to the point. Jaden and I met And the intimate time was good, not quite to the satisfaction level I experienced with James, and definitely no emotional connection, but very fulfilling, mostly because of the pure desire and forbidden nature of what we were doing. I left his place after approximately 90 minutes and arrived home just after 6:40. To my surprise, James wasn't home, yet I was fine with this, as it gave me time to shower and put my clothes in the washer to eliminate Jaden's cologne scent. I didn't want James exposed to this, though. I felt physically satisfied. I had deep feelings of guilt, shame, and regret, and just felt unclean. I had a real internal battle happening, and was anxious. I decided I would prepare a quick but excellent dinner for James and lit candles to create romantic ambience. I wanted to ensure he knew how much I loved him, and that the physical affair with Jaden meant absolutely nothing to me. It was purely physical, and nothing close to the love and physical fulfillment I have with him. I hoped we would conclude our evening making love. I know some may think this is selfish and absolutely disgusting, but remember, I used protection for everything I did with Jaden, and no bodily fluids of any kind were exchanged. At 7:30, James still wasn't home, and I tried calling him, but it went directly to voicemail. So I texted stating I was home with dinner waiting. I heard nothing from him. It was now 8:50, and I was becoming concerned. I kept calling and leaving messages and sending text. Around 9:30, I received a text from him stating, "Don't wait up, I'll be home late." I texted back asking where he was and who he was with, but he didn't respond. I was exhausted and fell asleep. Sometime after midnight, I was awakened by the sound of the shower in the guest bathroom running, and got up to check. The door was locked, completely uncharacteristic for James, so I knocked, but he didn't answer. Then 10 minutes later, James emerges with a towel wrapped around him and said, "Hey, how was your evening?" I told him it was fine, but then he directly asked me, "Did you sleep with Jaden?" I asked him not to use that phrasing, but then admitted that yes, Jaden and I had been together. I then asked where he had been. He said he had spent the evening at several establishments and had been dancing. I asked who he was with, as I could smell perfume on his discarded clothing. I asked, "Who is this woman?" He stated that since they didn't sleep together, he didn't need to tell me who she was. I can't say the explicit words here, but I can add that he never used profanity with me, so his way of speaking to me and using that word made me very concerned. I then asked him why he used the guest bathroom to shower, and he told me he would be using the guest bedroom and bathroom until I took 2 STD tests. His words devastated me, and I responded, "What, this wasn't part of our rules?" I made sure Jaden used protection for everything we did. He retorted, "Have you never heard of oral HPV or oral herpes? I'm not getting within 6 feet of you until you're cleared. You can consider this my version of social distancing." I was incredibly upset, crying, and told James the first wanted to close our marriage, as this was the last thing I had wanted to happen. James retorted, "Absolutely not. You had your turn, and now I'm going to have mine." Upset, I kept crying as he simply stated he was going to bed because he had an early conference and needed rest. I spent most of the night crying my eyes out, eventually falling asleep on the sofa. By the time I awoke, James had already left. He had sent me a message saying, "Don't wait up for me." I tried calling him, but he didn't answer. I sent texts and left messages throughout the day, but he never responded. I was sick and felt like I was losing my mind, thinking I had probably destroyed my marriage. We didn't have any deliveries that day, so I didn't see Jaden, but I called him at 4:30 and asked if we could meet tonight. He agreed and mentioned I sounded distressed. I told him I was, but said we discuss it. When I arrived at his place, we met, and I told him I wanted to end our relationship, admitting it was a huge mistake as I loved my husband and wanted only him. I explained the situation, and he understood. The only thing he requested was one more hookup, after which he'd never interact with me again except for work purposes. I agreed, and we had a very brief hookup, nothing but basic position, which lasted less than 10 minutes. Afterwards, he told me, "That was awful. You just laid there like a log." I apologized, admitting this whole thing was a huge mistake, and it wasn't his fault. I got dressed, gave him a final embrace, and left. Before I departed, Jaden said, "I'll never understand women like you." I asked what he meant by the comment, and he simply said, "Nothing, no comment," with a look of complete disgust on his face. I quickly left, crying the entire drive home. How could I have been so foolish? I destroyed my marriage for what for? Absolutely nothing. I thought I had to be the most idiotic person alive, and again just felt dirty. James didn't come home until 1 that night. I was sick, knowing I had single-handedly ruined my life. On Friday, James did the same thing and left before I got up, and sent me a text stating, "Don't wait up for me." This distance and coldness were crushing to my soul. I love spending time with my husband in the mornings, evenings, and weekends, preparing his meals, cuddling, taking walks after dinner, and just talking about random stuff. This was all gone, and I missed it terribly. I texted James and said I wanted to speak with him tomorrow morning, and he texted back and said okay, as long as it was first thing as he was leaving for the day. I responded back asking where he was going, but he didn't reply. He didn't get home until 1:30. I didn't say anything and just laid in bed crying. He again took a shower and just went straight to bed. I woke early to wait for James to get up. He came into the kitchen at 7 and poured some orange juice. The atmosphere was very cold and emotionless. He made no eye contact and just sat down at the table with me and started looking at his phone. I got up and went over and sat on his lap and said, "Look at me." He looked away, but I said, "Look at me," and gently grabbed his face, looking into his brown eyes. I told him I loved him with all my heart and that I made a poor decision, not a poor mistake, a poor decision. I told him I was sorry and would do anything to regain his trust and love. He didn't say anything and just looked at me like I was crazy. I asked him if he loved me, and he said nothing. I said, James, please answer me. He said he didn't know. I just started crying and said, I can fix this. He told me I don't think you can. I then called him a jerk and said, you planned all this. You set me up to divorce me, didn't you? He said he didn't, but did admit. As soon as I brought up the concept of an open marriage, he knew our marriage was probably over based on what he had researched. I then asked him why didn't he just shut me down and demand I end all contact with Jaden. He said you can't force someone to be faithful. You either are or you're not, and you obviously are not a monogamous person. I just cried and told him I was, and to not throw us away, he said nothing, just got up and said he was leaving. I asked where he was going, and he said he'd be back after midnight. I then reminded him that tomorrow was Easter Sunday, and we were scheduled to leave at 7 to drive to my parents' house. My family absolutely adores my husband, and we spend nearly every holiday with him as his parents now live in Florida. He told me he wasn't going. I was shocked and devastated and asked him to please come with me, and he just coldly said no. I asked him what I was going to tell my parents, and he said he didn't care, then said just tell them the truth. I begged and pleaded with him to stay home with me, but he just got dressed, took a gym bag of clothes, and left the house. I am destroyed inside and feel totally deflated. I want to ask you all here for any suggestions and steps I can take to save my marriage. I'd really like to hear from any people who have done something similar with open marriages and whether a couple can recover from such a betrayal. I'd really like to hear from people who have successfully reconciled after an open relationship. Thank you for being here listening to my story. I'm going back to bed now to cry for the rest of the day. Update when I wanted to give everyone an update. First, I want to thank those of you who responded with feedback and support. It really helped me get through the last couple of days. There were many people who rightfully criticized me and called me awful names, but I deserve it, and I appreciate your feedback too. Easter Sunday and today have been very difficult days for me, two of the worst days of my life. I drove to my parents' home, and when I arrived, the first thing they asked me was, "Where's James?" The first lied and told him he had an emergency at work and would not be able to make it. I told them this as I did not want to disrupt our family gathering. My family believed my story, but grew suspicious as the day progressed, as I was not texting or calling my husband like I normally do to deflect their suspicion. I sent several fake texts to throw them off and acted like I received texts back from him and told everyone he was still busy at the office and would call me tomorrow. Truth is he never called or texted me, not even to see if I arrived safely. This broke my heart. I planned to stay over at my parents' house and tell them about our marital problems on Monday. I dreaded doing so as I knew they were going to be furious and hate me. Well, I told them this morning, and it went just as I predicted. They yelled, called me terrible names, said they didn't raise me like this, and a bunch of other things. They called my sister to join us, and she proceeded to tear me apart too. I cried and told them I was sorry. I told them I know what I've done is terrible and that I have learned from this and will never make the mistake again in the future. I told them my sole focus for the foreseeable future is to win back the love and trust of James. At the end, though, they were very upset with me. They told me they loved me and would pray that our marriage can be salvaged. I drove home Monday evening. During the day, I called and texted James, but he did not reply. When I arrived home, I found a note on the counter stating he had gone to Florida to visit his parents and would return on Sunday. I felt so bad as we planned on going to visit them sometime in early May, and now because of me that's not going to happen. I hate myself. That's all I've got to say for now. I'm just really depressed and sad. What scares me is I'm no longer crying. The hurt and remorse I feel is so deep inside me now. Tears are worthless. Update 2. It's been almost a year and I didn't plan on posting again, but there was such an outpouring of interest from the community. I decided to, well, I have bad news and some good news. First, the bad news: I am divorced. It was final back in December. In the end, James decided he couldn't remain married to me after I was with another man. He said he could never trust me again and was embarrassed to be seen in public with me. He feels divorce gave him his masculinity back. I disagree, as he never lost his masculinity, and no one knows about my brief connection with Jaden except for our families, but okay, whatever. Now for the good news: no strike. That the great news: James and I started dating again last month. We got back together on Valentine's Day, and it's been fantastic. We only see each other whenever he wants, which has been about once a week, but our passion level is off the charts, way higher than when we first got together 7 years ago. Now he's made it clear to me that this is only a physical thing, and that we will never again be married, live together, or be a couple ever again. I'm okay with this. Well, not really, but I'll take what I can get. My goal is to win back James, and if I can't do that, I want to have his babies. Now, don't get the wrong idea. I would never baby trap him. I just would like to have children with this man. I've thought out how we could share custody and make this all work without being married. I know it sounds crazy, but I love him and don't want children with anyone else. I know doing so would likely jeopardize any potential relationship I might have with another man, but I don't want anyone else but James. That's all I have to share now, and I'll probably not post again unless something major happens, but I would love, love, love to get your feedback on my situation. Do you think I'm crazy for dating James? Should I just try to move on and find another love and start a family with that person instead? P.S. Jaden is not an option, and never was. He was just a bad decision I made and will never make again. Thank you.